So our theme is happiness. And just thinking about, well, what do we say about happiness? I thought it was cool in the two readings. Father Edward Hayes says, live in joy. Make that your place of residence. And that Ty had said, and I hadn't even thought of this before, how these readings connected. Be wary of negative thoughts taking up residence within us. And so I thought that was interesting in terms of home or residence. And when I don't say it as often as anymore. I think it's true, but it's just one of those phrases that I used to say. People would say, I would say, and I think I may have borrowed this from somebody, but I think I made it up. What's the opposite of happiness? And I would say seeking happiness. And the idea being, if I do this and I do that and I do that, then I will be happy. Rather than, can we get to happiness right now? Can we get to happiness with that in-breath and out-breath? With what we see out the window? With making a bee sound and hearing the vibration? And I've got a great, my mom's here with us today. She's in her early 90s. She's been a great teacher to me on happiness. And again, none of us has this perfect, but I remember, Mom, you said this many times. She's like, people worry all the time. She said, 90% of what they worry about never happens. And the other 10%, there was nothing you could do about it. So, like, all that worry, almost 100% of it is useless, as Thich Nhat Hanh and Ruth Malley tell us. Sometimes maybe we can understand things by looking at their opposite. As I said, the happiness versus seeking happiness. And I was thinking about this. Maybe if we ask people what's the opposite of happiness, they might say sadness. And at some level, of course, that makes sense. But then I was reflecting on two of the saddest points in my life. When my dad passed away in 1997, and when my sister died in 2007. And both of those times I experienced a lot of sadness. But it wasn't like it was, this will sound weird, but it wasn't like it was standing in conflict with happiness. It was more, I guess, like the other side of the coin. My dad happened to die at home, and we were able to be there. And of course I was in tears and very sad. But I wouldn't have traded that for the world. And after my sister died, and she was younger than I am now, I remember getting together with my niece, her only daughter, actually in my sister's home. And it was the first time my niece and I had seen each other. And we embraced. And we were both crying. And there was great sadness. But I'm grateful for that hugging with my niece and sharing our grief, our sadness, our mourning. I don't see it almost, I guess I'm trying to say, like, the sadness isn't necessarily, I mean, I think it can become, we could become consumed with sadness or whatever, but the sadness doesn't have to be in conflict with happiness. When I think of things in conflict with happiness, I think of despair and fear and anger and hate. Thich Nhat Hanh says, one of the keys to happiness is freedom. And we all love our freedom. But he invites us to really think about that. When we say freedom, he's not done, he ain't done talking. Because it's not just freedom to do whatever the heck I want. Because we all know folks who just like, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want. And they presume, I guess, that will bring them happiness. And if you know folks who just go and, hey, whatever I feel like doing, I'm going to do, they don't usually end up being very happy people. There's a certain discipline I find in my life, like, and again, if there's too much, there's the Buddhists speak of the middle way. If there's some discipline, it will actually help with my happiness. Train. I feel like when Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about that stepping on the ground, really feeling it with your feet. And with the train going by, don't try to block it out. Just, there's the sound of the train. And I like the psalm, how the psalmist writes of, I'm gonna make sure I get the line right here. It is He, God, that made us, and we are His. We are of the earth, and we are of God. If we are not of the earth, what are we of? What are we made of? If we are not of God, what are we of? And when I can open my heart to that and my spirit to that, there's joy there. I'll go out and do the 6 directions prayers and connect with the ancestors. Mentioned a couple weeks ago, my Aunt Eleanor passed away. So many aunts and uncles, 18 in my life, and friends and other family members. And when I connect with their spirits, it's always uplift. It's always uplift. They're a part of me, I'm a part of them. In Buddhism, they speak of craving, anger, jealousy, fear, despair, pride, anxiety, wrong perceptions. Those don't lead to happiness. So I've played around with what are the opposites of those. The true opposites that truly oppose. I guess that's what I was trying to say about, like, sadness doesn't oppose happiness. Dread, fear, anger opposes happiness. But sadness has a place in my life. But anyway, back to these 8. Craving, generosity and gratitude. Anger, deep joy and playfulness. And children are great for that, right? To bring out the playfulness in us. Craving, anger, jealousy, selflessness, connectedness. When you feel connected to people, do you feel jealous? Fear, compassion, and loving kindness. Well, is compassion the opposite of fear? Let me say this. Think of moments when you felt compassion. Another train. Think of moments when you feel compassion. Are you in fear? Despair, happiness, and contentment. I want to say just a couple words about contentment. Years ago, back in 2004, I had the opportunity to travel to Ireland for the second time in my life, and I met this guy named Jerry Keating. I would love if Jerry Keating, if he saw this video. And he was just the most gracious and hospitable person. I was doing some work on storytelling, and I was able to meet him. And he told me a story about stacking the big stones. You can imagine in Ireland, most of us have seen those images of the stone walls. And he says, there's no mortar, there's nothing. He's like, that's all gravity. You have to line those up. And he said how he had difficulty with it first, but he finally figured out how to do it. And he'll go out there and he'll work at, getting the stones just right. And he told me one day he's out there working, and one of his neighbors walks by. And evidently, unbeknownst to Jerry Keating, unbeknownst to him, this neighbor stood there just watching him. And what's he doing? He's putting stones on top of each other. We actually saw our neighbors doing this the other day, too. They were building a stone wall. And I lived and worked in Ireland. Some of you know me. I'm also an Irish storyteller. I sometimes utilize the brogue with the O'Malley background, and I picked it up when I was over there. And this woman, she says to Jerry, she says, "Jerry, you just look so happy there. You're just stacking stones. And you look as happy as can be." And Jerry Keating, he says to me, he goes, Michael, she's right. He says, "Michael, I'm content. I'm content, Michael." And it struck me how rarely do I hear people in my country in America say that they're content. And there's almost even like, oh, I don't want to be content. That's like I'm getting lazy or something. I don't know what it means. So I throw that out as an alternative to despair. Happiness and contentment. And you could say, oh my gosh, Michael, come on. This is ridiculous. Everything that's wrong in the world, there's shootings, there's horrific things going on, people struggling in so many ways, financially, mental health, emotionally, relationships, all across the board. And you want to talk about being happy? I mentioned this in an email I sent out recently. I look on the shelf and I see the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I see another book called Happiness by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I think of these guys who went through all the sufferings of Tibet and South Africa and Vietnam. And they tell us happiness. We have to keep going back to happiness. That's the key. I'll go through these last couple. Buddhists speak of pride. The antithesis, the opposite of pride, gentleness, humility. And I'll remind us that humility has the same roots as humus, the earth, and humor. Anxiety. Open-heartedness and confidence instead. And wrong perceptions, agape love, and the insight of interbeing, the recognition of our connectedness. We're going to experience moments of fear and anxiety and even dread. But we can come back. We can come back to happiness. Mindfulness can help with that. Friends can help. Relationships can help. Looking at the dog. Spending time with a loved one. letting your feet touch the earth, recognizing our connection to the sacred. There is so much to be grateful for and joyful about. And this is not about Pollyanna positivism. We do need changes in this world, big changes in our societies, in our cultures, in our countries, for this earth. I am confident that we can make at least some of the necessary changes. Make it through this birthing process of this rough time. But we're not going to do it from a stance of gloom and doom. We're going to do it from a place of recognizing joy. Also recognizing what needs to change. Also moving toward justice, but also with song. Also with play. Also with contentment. I invite you to enjoy the sound of the bell and the sound of the trains. I'm reminded of, it's an old phrase, my friend Michelle said it years ago and it just hit me so hard. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the play. Let's enjoy it. Let's add to the good. And what the heck, let's have some fun. Enjoy the bell.